This is a call to order, a regular meeting of the Personnel, Pension, and Insurance Committee of the Metropolitan District, Monday, June 24th, 2024. Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Right?
Are there any other commissioners that have called in on a phone number? Okay, we still have a quorum.
Okay. Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Once again, are there any public comments relative to agenda items? There being none, we will move to item 3, approval of meeting minutes of May 20th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second? Do I have a second?
I second it.
Are there any additions, deletions? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Moving to item 4, discussion with regards to the RFI with regard to the industry information on technology for conducting employee climate survey.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Kelly Shane, Chief Administrative Officer. You had it on the agenda to discuss the
Yes.
RFI submission. So we had one response. I believe you all had, as the committee members, you were the evaluators, and you received a document to sign to evaluate the unredacted version of the submittal. The one submittal was from Amazing Workplace. Yeah, Amazing Workplace. You received both their commercial brochure, and they also responded to the specific request within the RFI. That's the information that I have for you, and I believe that the purpose of that RFI was the pre-procurement planning for the possibility of developing an RFP. We were to look at the scope and look at the industry best practice. Unfortunately, we only got one response, but I hope you had the chance to review it. I think we sent it out in a good amount of time, at least a week, if not a little before a week prior to this meeting. We also got to look at this software that this one provider shared, both on their commercial document as well as their responses. I thought it was intriguing, the information that was there. So I don't know if you have any comments to provide on your feedback or what you would like to do next. I know what I would recommend that we do next, but I open it to you for discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, well, I'm not surprised that we only got one response on this. I think, quite frankly, we need to prepare an RFP to have firms to submit to the process in terms of doing the climate survey. I mean, I don't think people are going to, sort of give away their trade secrets and their processes and what have you. So that would be my recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Would tend to agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I did read through the submittal, and I found it interesting. As Kelly said, it was a very interesting read, and however, I think we should move to produce an RFP for this climate study and, as we asked before, and get it started. One of the things I've been a part, as in my career, my professional career, I've been a part of dozens of RFPs, and on both sides of the table, as a respondent and also as someone that's written the RFP and put it out and to review them. And I think unless there's some sort of opportunity for a contract and some work, you're not going to get a lot of responses. And I think that that's what we need to offer in an RFP in order to get the kind of response that would help us, decide which direction to go in with it. I think that we should, at this point, establish a date for the production of an RFP for a climate study and get it out as soon as possible so that we can get a response back in a reasonable amount of time and be looking at the responses, sometime relatively soon so we can get it started this year and get the study itself back, in this calendar year. So.
Anyone else?
If I may, Commissioners?
Sure.
So two of the purposes of the RFI, per your direction, was to identify the scope by looking at industry best practices. Like, we spent a couple of weeks, staff spent a couple of weeks putting this RFI together to be able to identify for industry enough information to get from industry information to put together for a scope. Right now, you're saying to put together an RFP. It would be a little premature because I don't have enough information to write a scope. What I would suggest, though, is since we did get this response from this company who seems to have a product and provide services that support this type of RFP and or services, that similar to the other RFI that we did for the technology committee, that we follow through with the process. And also because we don't know really what the budget would be for an RFP. And typically when we go out for an RFP, we know what the budget is. We know what we're asking for. I don't feel educated enough to be able to go out for an RFP with enough information to be able to evaluate that RFP. As you know, Commissioner, we need to go out with evaluation criteria. We need to set a detailed enough scope to be able to compare apples to apples. What software are we requiring? What type of services are we requiring in addition to the software? How are we going to administer those, the survey, how often, et cetera. So I don't feel that we have enough, but I do feel that since we have one respondent, that my recommendation would be to have that respondent in to ask questions, get more information on their best practices, their software, how they would put together an RFP, what services they would put in a scope, those types of questions that you could ask a respondent generically, but at least ask a respondent so we could get more information to be able to put together a scope that would be realistic and understand what the costs might be for the services that you require.
Mr. Chairman, I thought that's what we did with this. And, I don't see any of that, or not enough of that. As Kelly said, perhaps there's not enough of it, but, this is, I think in the industry itself, this is, a well-known practice, a climate study, and I don't believe that, we could certainly go out to the industry and ask the same questions and in an RFP and get responses that would include, offers of the services and the fees so that we can determine, what we want to do with it.
I guess my concern here, we're not talking about rocket science. People do climate studies all the time. And I'm just concerned here that we keep fiddling around and we never really get to what we need to do, and that is to do the climate survey. And that concerns me. Yes?
Commissioner Drake, you say you do them all the time. I'll be honest with you. I'm 68. I've never seen one ever done, but I know there's a different world than my world, but I used to work for Pratt Whitney, Sikorsky. I've never seen one. Are there companies that actually do this?
Yes. Yes,
So why
it's
didn't
done all the
anybody
time.
respond? I mean, this one particular company, they have a $7,000 software package, which is fine. But the idea you're going to ask them to come in and see what to do when they're selling a little package. Is it possible we could just go on the internet and get an employee survey, some standard thing, and we work it ourselves and send it to everybody and do it that way? I mean, just seems odd nobody responded to this. Again, it's over my head. It's not what I do usually see, but it just seems odd nobody was interested. I don't know. I would think someone would throw a piece of paper back with 2 pages or something. They goes, but
We didn't offer anybody a job, so I mean, you're not going to get a big response from the industry when there isn't really an offer. We voted to have a climate study done, and we appropriated $50,000 to try to put together, what we want to do for a climate study. So all we really need to get is, as you said, certainly in an RFP, they'll submit, past practices. I mean, you can sort of delete all the names to protect the innocent and guilty or whatever, but they can show you what, their own past practices with a climate study. I mean, that's what you'd expect to see. But you're not going to get a big response if there isn't an offer to actually do some work and a chance for a company to have a contract to get some revenue.
I agree with you. It just seems odd to me, but yeah.
Yes, thank you. So as the agenda item is, the whole idea of the RFI was to gain, MDC hasn't done this before, right? And as you had mentioned, there's a lot of companies out there that haven't done it. There's a lot of companies that have. This is an industry, you can buy this software you can buy literally and implement it yourself. The whole idea of an RFP is to make sure that the scope is correct, and obviously make sure that the budget's correct. The reason why we went to an RFI was to make sure we had enough money to understand what the scope was, so that we don't go with the 50,000. So I guess the point is, we've already invested 2 weeks of time with staff. You have one responder. The more information staff has to help craft an RFP that produces more than one bidder would be helpful to staff, right? So we're talking about, we wrote an RFI, we simply take the same information and put it in the RFP, and then we might only get one bidder. I don't know. But the question is, how much is the scope that we're asking for the right scope? And so the whole idea of the RFI process was, let's see from industry what they do, how they do it, and then it would help us craft an RFP scope. That's all we're suggesting
No,
is.
but that's what we did, though, right? Nobody responded.
Well, we had one response.
Yeah, but that was no good, though.
Well, no, it's not that it wasn't any good. It's just you had one response.
It seems to me, again, I don't want to interrupt. Why don't we just put together 1 or 2 page thing and say we have 460 employees, they do this, and that, and we want to do a climate survey. Give us a proposal. Let them do whatever they want. If that's what they do, just leave it. Don't define what you want. Just say we want a climate survey based on who we are, what we do, and let people respond. And for the real proposal. Do we have to go deeper than that? I don't know. If this is their business, they should be able to respond based on what we are, right? Look at, this is us. We want to do this, and put a page out.
Commissioner Avedisian, I agree with you, and I think we ought to read the tea leaves here, because one person responded, and I agree with the chairman. This is not rocket. We're not building a rocket here. We're trying to do a simple 2-3 page piece of paper that out of probably, in my opinion, out of 450 people, if we get 100 people to respond to it, we're doing pretty damn good based on the different places I've worked, and the same type of questions have been asked, but people are scared to ask it. They just feel, they're going to get retribution and so forth, or they just don't believe in it and they say, eh. So why don't we just, we can either go with what our people in human resources are telling us, because that's what they get paid for. They gave us an idea of what we should do next, or just have human resources take it over, do it, send it out, see what we get. We can always go back to trying to find somebody to put something more together, but I don't really think it's necessary.
Well, look, and this is just my perspective. We do not want this to be controlled or be operated internally.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I'm hearing.
This is something that must be done by outsiders.
Question, why? Because I'm trying to understand.
Because people are concerned about being traced, or people may be concerned about being traced. And basically what we want is that we want a situation where people feel that they can respond openly and honestly with regard to the survey.
Just to respond to that, if I may, is that of the 5 places I've worked that have had that with outside people, they have the same concern. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well,
They have the same concern. So it doesn't matter whether it's an outside group or an inside group, they're gonna have the same concern.
I think it's to try to answer some of your question too, is that it's not as if we didn't give a reason for doing a climate study, or at least some reasons. And at the very beginning, I offered, because I've been a part of these before in other public agencies and also in private business, on behalf of public agencies have done this. So one of the reasons was about 1.5 years ago, I think, or maybe a little longer, we signed 3 new contracts with our bargaining units. I don't know exactly when it's more than 1 year ago, but I don't know if it's 2 years ago yet. But, and we've had some significant changes in our relationship with the vast majority of our employees, which are the bargaining unit employees. I think we all agreed when we did the multitasking job descriptions that this was we expected it to be a good thing for the MDC. And I expect that it has been. It's been a great thing for the MDC. We've been able to do 2 things with that. I think one is to a certain extent reduce the workforce to positions that we really need, and no overlapping positions. And the other is that each one of the employees has had their job description modified, has had it in some way, expanded, and they've gotten training, and their value as an employee has grown with respect to the MDC because of multitasking. So I saw those all as really good things. And then in our latest contract, we had some other changes that were instituted that were not in previous contracts. I know there were some objectives that Scott had that I thought were good things. They were basically to try to find ways to reduce costs in a number of ways with our employees. I know one of the things, Scott, that you worked on was about post-employment benefits and so forth. And I think that we've come more into line with I don't want to say private industry, but the more of contemporary ways to deal with these issues. Where in the past with collective bargaining, some of the benefits have grown to points where they've become like really expensive for the agency itself, and they were basically initiated in response to perhaps not passing out big raises. We gave out another holiday or 2 more holidays or somebody's birthday off or something. I mean, those are the kind of things that everybody goes back to look at years later. And, but I do think that, and I know that, I mean, you can play the tape back or something, but I know that I articulated this, that the fact that we had these new contracts and that we also have new leadership for the 3 bargaining units, that it was an opportunity to look at after they've been in place for about 2 years, by the time we get this thing started, to see what the reaction has been to that. That, you know, if that's generated any issues among employers or the employees, I mean, and to find out, you know, whether or not we headed in the right direction and whether it's created a problem. So I think that there are reasons and there are questions that could easily be asked and I'm sure that our staff has the ability to work with, you know, a consultant that could do that and articulate what it was that we're looking for. And I'm sure that a consultant that does this, you know, as a regular course of business knows how to ask those questions. So, but that was we did give reasons for this, and it's not as if we're just, you know, poking around. It's, you know, I expect that, you know, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't expect to have some positive comments come back, because some of the changes that we've made have been really, as I said, have been really good. I don't expect that this is going to produce some kind of a big problem for the MDC. I think it's going to produce a bunch of information that we can take a look at, and that management can look at, and employees can look at and say, well, you know, maybe we can refine this somehow. We can fix this. If it's creating a little problem over here, we can refine this. We can modify this. I think it's the kind of thing that we really owe it to the district itself to make sure that we've made an effort to look back and see that, you know, all that we've done is headed in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I think those are my reasons for doing this.
Let me also state here, one of the things I think that is particularly important, and that what you have to do when you're talking to employees and people in an institution, is that you have to use the process. If you don't use the process, and if you don't trust the process, then you're going to have serious issues somewhere along the way. It's going to blow up in your face. My concern, basically, is that if there are people in this company who feel that they've got a gripe and they are afraid to express it, this is a way to give it an airing. Now, you know, it may not be everyone, but at least they've had an opportunity. Now, you know, if they don't avail themselves of this opportunity, then quite frankly, I don't know what to say with them. Because what I have said to people that have come to me is that it is not my job as a commissioner to be an avenging angel. That's not our job. There are 2 sides to every story. You have to use the process. My concern here is that there are people who are afraid to use the process, and that the climate study hopefully is a valid way of getting at it. Now, if they don't come forth, then shame on them. They had the opportunity. Now, you know, beyond that, you know, I don't know what to say. But I think that we need to make sure that people feel that they can say what they have to say and say it without fear of retribution or what have you. And that's why I think that the climate study is particularly important. That's why I think it's important that to the extent that we can, that we isolate it so that employees feel comfortable and have an understanding, basically, that they're not going to be subject to retaliation if they make any negative comments. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Commissioner Mandyke.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Mandyke, could we just have staff explain to us right now our current policies at the MDC for anyone who wants to come in and has a complaint, how they can do so confidentially, just so we understand what the current process is right now? That would be extremely helpful to me.
If Rita could answer those questions.
Very simple, chain of command.
Climate study is not about complaints.
Yeah.
Well, we just heard that. We just,
Well, is someone, excuse
which is not confidential. People can come to me and file a complaint if they feel that they've been discriminated against based on a protected class. If it goes to full investigation, then I cannot keep it confidential in regards to protecting the name of the person who is bringing the complaint, but it's kept confidential to the extent it can be. But at the same time, if people have a right to come to me and talk to me on a confidential basis without it going forward to a complaint, I can guide people at a level, an initial level, so that they can make a determination in terms of whether or not they want to come forward. I give them information in terms of how the complaint process works. Obviously, when somebody brings a complaint, there is a complainant and there's a respondent. And if somebody has a complaint lodged against them, we have a responsibility to let them know that to give them information if you have a complaint lodged against you, so that you can defend yourself. But that would be the process under the affirmative action plan. But the other process, which is one that is strictly confidential, is the whistleblower process. And that is administered by a third party, Lighthouse Services. So if an employee has a concern, they don't want to come forward, they don't want to give their name, there is a website, there's a telephone number, there's a web address that they can go to, and they only can provide the information that they feel comfortable providing. All complaints that come through the whistleblower process are kept confidential to the extent possible. Over the years, I've administered this process. People have filed complaints without their identity being revealed, and that we've been able to look into concerns that people have in a confidential manner that does bring resolution. So I think, with that said, in summary, there are processes that are available within MDC and that people do use on a regular basis. And people, I believe, staff, that is, employees, it's important that they make the determination in terms of whether or not how much of their identity they want to reveal. Although when people do bring complaints forward anonymously, we do have to bear in mind, though, if the complaint is completely anonymous, sometimes there's a limit to how far we can go in terms of investigation. But I can assure you that all complaints that come through either process are taken quite seriously, and they're looked into to the extent that they can be looked into. And staff within MDC do avail themselves regularly of both avenues.
and just to add, that policy was approved by this committee and the full board. John, do you know the date of that? Okay, but it is the policy that was approved by the board.
Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rita.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Curry? First I was surprised and disappointed that we only had one response to the RFI. Kelly suggesting that maybe we should bring the RFI responder before us and pose some questions and gather some information. My first reaction was, but the more and more I listen to the comments, I'm inclined to think that might be the way to go. And I realize it's going to put another few weeks delay on the final process. But, my concern is not with faith or trust that our administration and our HR department could produce and do a climate study. My concern is, and I think that if we were to do our own climate study versus an outside consultant doing a climate study, I think the results would be very similar. But that being said, I think the RFI responder made it somewhat clear that it's an affordable process. It's not going to cost us $1 zillion to do this, whether we do it in-house or outside. And my biggest concern is that I want to be able to hang my hat on the findings, and I want to give credibility to it so that others can believe it is true. And that's not to say that I don't trust that our administration responses would not be true, but for a few dollars, when we're handing what I consider an audit of what our employees think about their job, their work environment, and everything else that goes along with a climate study, that I can hang my hat better on a consultant producing the results than I can in-house. Although I think the results will be the same.
All right, let me just, and thank you. Commissioner Curry has a tremendous amount of experience in collective bargaining. I know he doesn't talk about it here much, but I know he does. I have some. As a former union vice president, negotiator, I have experience, negotiating both contracts and going to mediation and arbitration, grievances. And I also have experience on the other side as management in negotiating things like pension plans and also, representing management in negotiations. So I'm going to say what I said before. There are ways to look at, what we've done. And I'll say again, for instance, in contracts, you want to measure what you've established as different paragraphs in your contract, and whether or not those were clearly understandable, and you have an opportunity to look at it. There are ways to measure that too. I mean, if one paragraph produces like 15 grievances in the next 2 years, then obviously there's something wrong with that paragraph. That's just an example, but it sort of works for both sides, and it has, to me, it has nothing to do with complaints. This has to do with understanding the relationship and making sure that we've done all that we can to promote the highest levels of productivity and satisfaction with people with their jobs and with their being able to conduct their jobs, and then satisfaction of both the district board through its management that the job's getting done, and it's getting done in a way that satisfies our customers. So I think that's, to me, at the core of why we want to do a climate study after, significant changes in the contractual arrangements that we have with employees and benefit changes and so forth. I think that's the reason that I wanted to see a climate study. And it really doesn't have anything to do with complaints or confidentiality in it. I think that you have to guarantee some confidentiality in it. And that's what I thought the whistleblower thing actually, that's not for somebody to say, geez, I think that the contract, there's some kind of mistaken concept here in the contract. You don't use a whistleblower thing for that. I mean, I'm still think that we need to do a climate study to make sure that, the changes that we've made are understood well by both sides and by employees and the district board through management, And I don't see it as a big deal, and I don't think of it as an expensive item either. So I thought the 50,000 could get us there, but if, I don't know how many opportunities we're gonna have, but we certainly have the opportunity, if it comes back, that it's gonna cost us more than that, but it's gonna produce what we really wanna have. We have the opportunity to change the contract amount. So far, we voted to have a climate study and appropriated $50,000 for it, and I'm just trying to see if we can get us to the point where that happens, before we have a new budget.
Commissioner Avdesian again. I guess, I hear what you're saying, Commissioner, but what I heard Commissioner Curry say about either way, you're gonna get, he feels he's gonna get not good results, comments, but there's nothing that we're gonna look at that and say, it's skewed, they did this, whether outside concern did it, or our people do it. And I will just say this for the last time, now keep my mouth shut. I would rather see our people do it based on the fact that we only had one company answer us. And based on the information we get, which is what you're also looking for, Commissioner Salemi, we decide if it's not what we think it should have been, then we spend the $50,000. But we're also here to do the best for our towns. And I personally think that spending $50,000 when we have an absolutely wonderful team, HR team available to do this, I think they can do it. I think they're more than capable of doing it, and I'll leave it at that.
Chairman, our staff said that they don't know how to do it.
Yes, well,
So I don't know where those comments are coming from.
Can I quickly?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Desai.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think hearing from both sides, and as Commissioner, Chairman Curry put it eloquently, I think at the end, when the results come out, you want to make sure that whoever is looking at it can say, this was done by a third party. And we understand, right? That would be the best solution, rather than saying, well, it was done by the staff and you still have some concerns, right? So I think staff wants to bring the consultant in. Maybe the best thing is, let them be satisfied, right? So staff is satisfied, we will be satisfied, and bringing third party in, it's a win-win solution, win-win situation, rather than, we have been discussing this for the last couple of meetings and we go round and round. I think we got RFP, we got response to RFI. It's not the great response. We got one. That shows that, it shows the interest that is out there in performing this type of, studies. So I would just recommend, maybe we move forward, bring them in, let them answer all the questions the staff has, because that's why we have staff, right? We have staff, from HR, we got all, CEO, we got our own attorneys. I think that's their job to make sure that if the consultant is hired, they're going to perform what the board is looking for, right? So why not we just bring them in and make sure that staff is satisfied with the scope and we move forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Drake, we've already decided we want a climate survey. I'm not sure what all these discussions are for. The issue we have right in front of us is nobody responded. So what we should do, I guess you could bring the guy in. He wants to offer something for $7,000. I wouldn't come in for $7,000, maybe do a phone call. I would put together one pager about who we are, what we are, our stuff, the unions, this, and go out and ask for a scope of work and a price. And if the guy knows what he's doing, and you probably have a bunch of guys, he'll respond with his boilerplate scope of work and a price based on who we are. And let's move on. We always just keep talking about, we need a survey, I understand, but we already had that conversation. Just go out again, RFP, 2 pages, no scope of work, ask for a scope of work and a price, and see what they respond. We're gonna respond. The issue right now in front of us, nobody responded. So that's the problem.
So I heard two different scopes here. We're asking what the scope is, and we're trying to.
We don't know the scope.
Hold it, please. We're asking for, how does the industry do this? So we talked about confidentiality. The firm that submitted and other firms that we know are out there, we've talked to a number of firms that did not respond. They use technology to do this, right? So this is a software package that actually gets implemented by staff. This is the way this works. And then the consultants use their expertise to analyze the staff, analyze the questions and help make recommendations. But I heard union issues. We're going to talk about and ask questions about union issues that have been negotiated and voted on. And then I'm hearing we're going to be talking about, complaints from employees. We're trying to understand what the market says a climate study should be. What they will tell you is it is confidential because they use software to communicate with the employees. So it is just like the whistleblower policy that was approved. They also will tell you that they don't, and Rita, if you could explain the process in which the types of questions they ask in these kinds of surveys, but they don't talk to ex-employees. They don't talk to people who have left, retired, terminated. But we have had lots of discussions at this table about those kinds of things. And what we would like to do is to have the firm that submitted to give all of us a better understanding of how do you actually exercise a climate study so that we can draft a climate study that will hopefully produce more than one bidder.
Why do you want to draft it, though? I'm
Well,
not sure why you want, let the vendor draft
Do
it.
you want to talk about union issues in the climate study?
Well, wouldn't the guy who does this for a living know that should be an issue? Or I don't know, that's what they do for a living. I don't know, we don't know how to do it.
Can I just say, I didn't say it was limited to union issues. Let's not say that there's like a polar opposite here. There's complaints and union issues. I said that that's one of the things that you can come up with. I mean, the kind of things that you might expect to find out about that is, we've set a schedule of how promotions are done. How you can get. We want to keep our employees here. We want our employees to have successful careers here. We want people to be able to move up and at least believe that they have an opportunity to move up. So we set a schedule of how that's supposed to happen, and maybe there's a glitch in it somewhere, and somebody says, "Oh, this is something I've seen before," where it's nobody's fault. With both sides failed to recognize that there was this one step that we should have taken. We didn't do it, so we went back and did it. So but it's not just about union issues. It's about employment at the district, and the kinds of things that we would expect our employees to be satisfied with, the kinds of things that we think that management should be measuring the productivity of employees with. I don't see any, I don't see that as being, like complaints versus union stuff. I think it has to do with employment. So
I think I had distributed a climate survey that was done at UConn in 2015. And I think that was sent to all the members of this committee. Is that correct? And I thought that would give people an idea of what a climate study looks like and the kinds of questions that were asked. I don't know. Has anyone taken a look at that? Has anyone read it? Because I think that it's very informative. And I think it gives you a pretty good idea of what a climate study is about. And it asks a number of questions. Now, if you're going to argue with a place like UConn in terms of their climate study, and if you can't look at that as a kind of template or a baseline or a starting point, I mean, I don't know, what you do. This is not something where you're pulling something out of thin air and you're trying to cook the books. UConn's a frontline university, and a great deal of thought and care went into putting the survey together and to analyzing it. And I thought that was a good place for people to start and to look at, because it gives you an idea what a climate study is all about. You know, and it's, you know, they're not coming in, you know, drawing and courting people and shooting staff and things like that. They ask a range of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Curry. Kelly, was the consultant to the company that responded to the RF, they were from Florida?
They're incorporated in Florida. They're actually located in the Washington State area. But they would be happy to be on a call to answer any questions. I just ask that the commissioners on the committee, as well as I know the whole, the response went out to everyone, all of the commissioners. I would just ask that everybody read it, because I think that this is a 2024 response to climate surveys and how they're conducted and what they are. And, you know, I think it gives a good idea of what's out in the market today and best practice. And I think it gives a lot of good information, but the questions that are coming forth here, or the ideas that are coming forth here, is the opportunity for you to ask a contractor who did take the time to respond to an RFI, who didn't have the opportunity to actually get a job out of this, if you want to call it that, because this was a request for information, which the PP&I committee asked us to conduct. This is the opportunity for you to ask the questions. Is this part of a climate survey? Can we use a software like this and customize it to ask certain questions? But I think the industry, from all of the research that Jamie and I did in putting together the RFI, was that that we shared with Scott, that we shared with you, is that technology is now used to draw this information out. And I think if you do look at their information that they provided, the brochure that they provided, they use technology to ask questions and they ask questions in many different ways to identify feelings and how employees really feel about their employer, and they draw out where the employer can really focus their attention to make changes. And I got that out of the few pages and that commercial document, but what I didn't get out of it was, and I got out of it for those on the committee, got out of it what the cost of the software licensing was, which was very reasonable. But what we didn't get out of that is for you to identify to us, if we do go out for RFP for up to $50,000, which is what you have budgeted, what exactly that scope is. And that's why we thought bringing them on a call where we could ask them and pull out the types of questions that everyone here has brought forward. Can we incorporate that into this type of software? Because that's what industry is using today, not the paper surveys that we may have seen in the past. Might be the same types of questions, but not in the same format.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the point of my question was that they're not in Connecticut. So I would suggest and encourage the committee to have Kelly reach out to whatever the name of the company was and get a couple dates and times, making them aware that some of the members still work, so it may not be conducive to coming in at noontime or 1 o'clock, but get some date and times, and then you could call a special meeting. Could be as soon as next week, depending on how quickly they respond, and we do a Zoom or WebEx meeting, and let's pick their brains, and it'll only put us out a few weeks, and maybe give us a better direction and a better understanding of where we're all headed.
The only thing I would ask about that is, I'd have to ask Kelly, I mean, I don't know how we do that, and then, offer the respondent to the RFI an opportunity to actually do the work. If they've consulted with us about how to put this together, and they're gonna tell us how they would put it together. And then what do we do? And we have an RFP, and they're one of the respondents, and you know, I don't understand how you'd have to explain. I'm not saying there isn't a way, because I know there is, but you'd have to reassure them that they have an opportunity to do this. Or are we saying that we'd have to pay them to do this phone call thing, and that would be enough? I'm just trying to understand that part.
So,
And with respect to the confidentiality, you know, I mean, I'm assuming that everybody, all the commissioners here anyways, and I asked about staff as well, signed what I thought was kind of a draconian kind of document, just so we could talk about this. And, you know, I think to say that other people might not be, or maybe are too concerned about confidentiality, what did I sign that for? But please explain how, you know, we could get them involved and they still have an opportunity to do a project with us. And if we can understand that, maybe we can do that.
okay. So the same process that we followed for the RFI for the Technology Committee, where we brought in CTEC, all of the other technology committee firms, we brought them in multiple times and interviewed them about their proposals and talked about pilot projects, et cetera, all I'm doing is trying to follow the same format. We put together a process and procedure for RFIs, which the Technology Committee approved, but we have a process and procedure for RFIs. This would just be following through on that same process and procedure of bringing in, just because we had one respondent doesn't change the process of bringing in a respondent to ask them questions about what they provided. The purpose of the RFI to begin with was twofold: to learn about industry best practices, to learn about scoping. It was a pre-procurement process that we were doing to learn about a scope and what was out there in industry, and to identify what on earth like the technology would cost, what the consultancy fees we asked for in the RFP. In the RFI, I'm sorry. We didn't get all that information because we got one respondent, but we asked for that information. This is to follow up on that information. I would not think that we would be asking them how to formulate an RFP. I think we would just be asking them about certain questions about a scope generically, about industry, about formulating questions. How does their software work? And is that what's normal in industry? You know, so that we can see if it's customizable, et cetera. Is that how it's done for a climate survey? They have a lot of experience. They identified testimonials in their RFI submission, in their brochure that is commercially available information. I'm sure it's all over their website too. But they can share information on their experience that I think would be valuable for all of us to be able to put together the scope that you're looking for.
What I'm asking though, Kelly, is, and sort of on their behalf, and as a person that's been consultant for, you know, over 30 years, you know, in my own career.
Understood.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, okay, so they give us all of this wisdom and answer our questions and help us put together an RFP. Are they going to have an opportunity to respond to the RFP after they've worked with us that way? I mean, we didn't go anywhere with the one from technology. I mean, we didn't award a contract anywhere, did we? Correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't award anything at the end of the
Commissioner,
RFI.
we did not put out an RFP from the Technology
Okay, so we
Committee
didn't-
for a new technology.
And in my opinion, we didn't seem to get anywhere with it yet either. Not
No,
yet.
but if we did, I don't think we would preclude any of those RFI submitters from putting in a proposal.
Okay, that's not what I heard, and I didn't hear it from a commissioner, but I did hear that, you know, that we shouldn't be talking to those people. But as long as they have some assurance that, you know, that if there is going to be an opportunity to do some work for the MDC and respond to an RFP, that they'll be able to do it. They're not going to be blocked from doing it because they talked to us about it. I'm asking that.
I will assure them of that I will assure them of that.
And how soon can we get them in here?
I haven't personally spoken to them yet, but I would assume that we can, can I let you know so that we can then,
Well, because I think if we're going to do that, then we should schedule a special meeting.
sure,
Do that, and to do that as quickly as possible.
sure, I will let you know, sir.
And I would suggest that all of you, if you haven't, that you take a look at the Yukon climate survey, all right? That was distributed to all of the committee members. Because I think that will give you a much better feel for what a climate survey looks like and the issues that it addressed, or the questions that they asked. Is there anything else in this? I think we flogged this enough. I'm looking at the clock, and unfortunately, I think that we are up against time constraints. And unless, we have a half hour? Oh, we do have a half.
It's 5:30.
Okay. If there's no more discussion on this, then let's move to item 5. Discussion of employee buyback pension credited time service.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jamie Harlow from HR. So the agenda item says discussion regarding employee buyback of pension credited service time. So based on the pension document, we do have a couple options that are available to employees. If they are from the city of Hartford, we do have a specific reciprocity agreement that provides them the opportunity to buy back qualified service credit through that process. And then we also have a service buyback option for employees that are coming from member towns. So that is separate from the reciprocity, which is more of a year-for-year credit. The actual buyback, if they're coming from a member town, is actuarially determined by our actuary, and then it's determined how much time, based on their time with that member town, can they buy specifically from the MDC, and they actually would have deductions from their paycheck for a period of time to buy that service time. So I don't know if there are specific questions, but that's what our plan provides for. Yes,
Is
Commissioner.
anybody doing that now?
Yes, we have a couple people who are actively in the service buyback, and we have had some recent individuals from Hartford as well on the reciprocity side.
Just one question of curiosity, and I know that the timelines for approval of Hartford's and the other member towns, but you stated them separately. Are there any differences between the Hartford's ability and the member town's ability?
There are differences in terms of the reciprocity is a true, like, they're essentially generally not, they're coming in, we're essentially just saying, okay, Hartford, they're saying they have 20 years of service with Hartford, they're coming here, we just give them 20 years of service. It's a full reciprocity. We're giving what we're being told by the city of Hartford in that case. They are the final say, basically, on determining what that service time is. And then with the service buyback, we actually work with the actuaries to determine based on their service time. So what did they contribute to their pension? For us, they have to pay 7.5% into the pension, and that's actuarially determined by, at this point, it would be USI, to determine a value that that employee then has to pay to us. So that's the difference, and they are spiked out totally differently in the plan documents as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And is that done according to some type of formula, or do we have something written out, or what? What's the process, or is there an element of is there an element of personal judgment? And I don't mean in
There is
a
not.
negative sense. I mean, in a sense that elements
No, it's pretty clear in the documents that it's member towns. So the only individuals that are offered this are individuals who have experience with member towns, for example, or the city of Hartford. So this is conversations that are generally taking place when we have new hires. So again, it's not a picking and choosing who gets to use it. There are also parameters in terms of the timeframes in which this can occur, which is generally within the very short term from when they're hired here at the MDC. There is one small caveat on the buyback with military service as well, but again, those are clearly defined in the document as well.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Patel here.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is normally the standard process, and it has been going on for years and years. So I think between actuaries, our staff, and we can just proceed with it. Thank you.
Commissioner Salami, did you have a comment?
Yeah, my question was, are all the member towns, their pension funds, are they all participants in the municipal employees retirement system, MRSA?
So I can't answer that from the member town perspective. What I can say is we have had a couple individuals recently, actually, who are coming from a member town who no longer has a pension. Those individuals are not eligible to buy back their service time because they weren't paying into a pension. So I don't know if that's kind of one deviation as member towns are getting away from offering pensions. This will be less of an issue because if you're not contributing to a pension at a member town, you don't get to buy service to then get that pensionable time here at the MDC. So you do have to be coming from a town that does offer a pension plan. So again, some of those are being phased out, but all member towns are eligible for the service buyback. So it's not restrictive of anyone. It's really going to be based on what those specific benefits are under that municipality.
Okay, so if it's not, I guess what I'm asking is, if they come from a town that participates in the same pension fund that we do, they just bring that pension with them. Am I correct with that or not?
No, it doesn't get added to our pension. It would be a separate pension unless they formally go through this process with the MDC. So what they're essentially doing is they're giving up their pension with their member town and adding it so they only have one pension at the time in which they retire with the MDC.
Do they move assets or anything from that pension
Yes,
plan
so
to us?
City of Hartford, we actually will get a check from the City of Hartford with the pension funds, and then we're getting the money from the employees, specifically for those who are coming from the member towns.
So we do this with, I guess it's, I'm having some difficulty with this. So even though they're in the same pension fund as we are, they close out their pension with the municipality, and we get a check, and then they become part of our pension fund. That's not, I didn't understand it that way. I thought, and maybe my understanding is from years ago when all the towns had a pension fund and it was the same as ours. So we don't do that with the state of Connecticut. State of Connecticut has a separate pension fund, so we don't accept the state of Connecticut, a check from the state of Connecticut, and you can't add your pension with the state of Connecticut to your pension at the MDC. It's two
Correct.
separate pensions.
Correct.
But
And
you
that's
can do that with the city of Hartford and any other municipality that participates in a pension fund.
any member town or the City of Hartford for reciprocity purposes. They're kind of two different buckets there. It's not really that different than 457Bs, 403Bs with other employers, where if you leave one employer and you have funds under a 403B plan, for example, with that employer, you don't automatically just put that into the account with your new employer. You actually have to go through steps to transfer the funds. So you're never, just because you are covered under the same, so we could have Empower here and go somewhere else that has Empower, they're always going to show as different buckets under, for example, employer A and employer B. They're never going to marry the funds because the breakout and how it's diversified could be very different. So I don't know if that helps clarify, but they are different
it-
processes.
Sort of, but but, and then you said that there are occasions where military, retirements they can buy those back or use those together with their, MDC, pension. That can become part of their MDC pension, military.
Yes, there is a specific section in the document that speaks to either voluntary or involuntary military service, for which time, again, it would outline specific parameters. I think it's something, don't quote me on this, but like 30 days after they are back from military service, they have to go through that buyback process.
Okay.
Well, I guess one of the things I would be concerned about here is how do we make sure that everyone is on the same page when we get into one of these situations where there is an employee who is essentially trying to buy back time? Because what happens is that people sort of go around and start talking to people. And I know that, there's confidentiality insofar as personnel matters are concerned. But I guess what I'm concerned from just sort of a process or procedural point of view, I would think that we would want to make sure that we all have the same story. And I guess how do we arrive at that?
I think it's.
How do we arrive at that? And without getting into the bloody details, unless you're forced to do that, all right?
Can I rephrase your question?
Huh?
Can I rephrase your
Yes,
question?
yeah.
Regardless of length of service, time of service, regardless of their classification, do you treat each and every employee the same and follow the same guidelines, policies, and procedures that would apply to that request?
Absolutely, as does all of my staff in HR.
And have you in the past, or has MDC in the past, not approved buyback?
Yes, I actually cited one example where they were not coming from a qualified plan because they weren't contributing. At that point, we then have to say they're not eligible. But we do absolutely engage in as many conversations with the employee to make sure that they understand the process, that we're understanding what they're looking to do so that we can vet that. If necessary, we also work with legal to make sure that we are getting opinions if we need to from pension counsel.
But I guess one of the concerns that I have is that as commissioners, we get hit with questions or people come in. I think that it's important that we all be on the same wavelength, because the process, as you say, operates in a certain fashion. And at the end of the day, it is what it is in terms of either you're in or you're out, or you get this or you get that. But what'll happen is that people will either come running to a commissioner, or there's a lot of background chatter that goes on. And I just want to make sure that we're consistent. And if you understand what I'm trying to get at here.
Can I respond?
Sure, please, go
Chris,
ahead.
I don't know if you want to respond first.
Yeah, no, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to your point, and it's a good one, to the extent that people come to commissioners with different stories about different, and maybe, I'm assuming that, and hopefully you get the full story, but sometimes nobody gets the full story. But that you would do consistently, as you've done in the past, is refer that to staff so that we make sure that everybody with similar situations are treated the same, right? And not every situation is the same, clearly. And oftentimes, in fact, in the past, since, just by way of example, since 2012, we've had 25 plus or minus referrals to pension counsel, because sometimes, as much as Jamie alluded to a couple of times, well, it's pretty spelled out, it's pretty simple. It's not as simple as that under the pension plan, and that has to be read in conjunction with state law, has to be read in conjunction with our general ordinances as it relates to the pension. And most importantly, has to be interpreted and compared to what is provided for in federal law, particularly the IRS code, making sure that we're a qualified plan, making sure that we're a tax-exempt plan, et cetera, that we follow our plan and that the trustee of the pension plan does what it is charged to do. So that being said, we have had situations where there's some nuances in a particular application or request. There's some are pretty standard, and Jamie's been handling those as a matter of course because the same fact pattern applies to all. But in some cases, for example, on the City of Hartford issue for, it has to involve a transfer of an employee from the city to the NDC. And all that relates back to, quite frankly, is a public policy decision that was made back when we were first formed in 1929, is we were taking a lot of people from the City of Hartford because we became the Hartford Public Works Department, at least as it relates to sewer and water back then. And in order, you didn't have, the NDC didn't have a built-in staff as of, some date in 1929 that all of a sudden we were going to open up our doors for business. We needed to use the expertise that was available to us in the City of Hartford, and we assimilated or took over or transferred, sometimes voluntarily, oftentimes involuntarily, employees from the city. And so we wanted to make sure that they remained whole as it relates to their pensions. So whatever they had over there or benefits with the city were brought over here. Now, I'm not sure there were defined benefit pension plans back in 1929, but as we move forward, and with the reciprocity agreement with the City of Hartford, which I think was the 1970s, what is it?
81.
81, thank you. 81, recognized that transfer of individuals that we want to make sure that in terms of their pension, at least they were made whole. And there's other nuances between, with different types of requests. I mean, there's two provisions in our pension, 3.4 and 3.5, which call out the reciprocity and request for payment or for purchase of credits on the pension. There's other provisions in the pension that refer to what is called a permissive pension purchase, but it really doesn't create another right. It just limits whatever rights you have in the pension. It limits the amount you can purchase, which is otherwise provided for in the pension, which again is 3.4, 3.5. So what we try to ensure we achieve is that everybody who's similarly situated is treated the same. And to the extent that anyone hears otherwise, we need to know about it because we either need the chance to explain why or how they were treated the same, or if it turns out they're treated differently, we need to address that. So, but that being said, I think Jamie's done an excellent job and her staff done an excellent job in terms of processing retirements and making sure that everybody gets the same benefit under the same circumstances. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Desai?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a simple question. I'm assuming that there are written procedures on processing this type of requests, right? I mean, normally you have 80% of things that are, consistent across the board, and there are always nuances that fall in 20%, and that's where you may have to interpret your federal regulation, state or local regulation, whatever. But 80% is all written down. That's the normal process. When application comes in, you go through that process, and that process, I'm assuming, is consistent across the board, whether engineer applies or janitor applies or whoever applies, right? Across the board is the same thing. So, so my question is, do we have written procedures where you follow as soon as the application comes in, and then you go through the process? And if there is a nuance, what would the process be? Like, refer to here, refer there, right? So that's what I want to understand from Jamie. Do you have like a written process, and that eliminates 70-80% of the issues, that people might talk about or whatever, right? And I'm assuming that's a public information as well, because that's just the process of how you, process your reciprocity. Thank you.
So I am hearing a lot of concern about making sure we're consistent. I can tell you we take being consistent very seriously in HR. It's our primary function is to make sure we are being consistent and that we are administering our plans appropriately. If we're not, then we're jeopardizing and putting them into disqualified status, which we do not want to do. So I want to reinforce we 100% take this responsibility very seriously. We do have standard operating procedures in HR for almost all of our tasks. I can't say if we specifically have it for this one, but the plan documents really are what govern the decisions here. Again, you're right. The vast majority of the situations that come through are going to be straightforward. Anytime we are in question, even if it's just a little bit of doubt, we are working with legal counsel to make sure that we are getting it right and doing the right interpretation. So again, I just really want to say we take it our responsibility very seriously. Hopefully that answered your question, Commissioner.
Anyone else? Opportunity for general public comment. I'm sorry, 6 recorded prior months retirements, resignations. Do you have anything there? Or?
Again, Jamie from HR. We had only one voluntary resignation in the month of May. It was an Asian female, exempt and excluded with 3 years of experience. No other activity.
Thank you. Opportunity for general public comments. Once again, opportunity for general public comments. Item 8, Commissioner request for future agenda items. Yes, the issue with regard to.
I have the report that we just heard from HR. This is one that we've been starting to get, but I would really, I'd appreciate it if that becomes a written report and it's kept by the district clerk, so that each report, it just adds up till we get it annually. We can see month by month what resignations, terminations, including, so that it's an actual written report that we can refer to at some point. And that becomes a compilation of all the months that, each month that goes by, and we can get that. Is that?
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
So I appreciate that it's an agenda item. I'm just asking if we can get it as an actual document that we can see, so.
Well, we can, but I mean, do we want?
In the future, I'm gonna have to get it. I'm not asking for it tonight, but I'd like to
Put that in the form of a motion?
No, for
see that.
This is John Myrtle. For that agenda item, the commissioner request for future agendas, it's been verbally requested, and then I communicate with the chair of the committee about placing that on there.
Okay. Yes, I'll make a request and we will discuss it. Labor Council, future agenda items.
Okay.
All right. Once again, are there any other requests for future agenda items? If not, I'll entertain. Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, what was that, Labor Council?
Yeah.
Another, that was your request. I thought you were.
Oh, no. No.
I'm sorry. Fine.
Once again, Commissioner request for future agenda items?
Sorry.
No, that's all right. If not, I will entertain the appropriate motion.